Live.
Okay, sir. So a couple of seconds in, we're nice and live now. Thank you to everyone that is joining us. We'll just give it a few more seconds just to let a few more people in. So, without any more delay, joining us today is the fastest growing YouTuber in the Star Wars galaxy, spreading love for the franchise instead of hate. It's Mike, aka a guy who loves Star Wars.
Right.
Wow, that was quite the introduction, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, I've been
Mike,
working
how
on
are
it,
you
mate.
today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
I'm good. I'm
Yeah, I'm
good.
good.
Nice. Yeah, fastest growing. I don't know about that, but I'll take it. I'll take it for sure.
Oh man.
Easily. Like Jimmy was saying before we went live, we've been following you for a while now.
Yeah.
And just watching you take off also helped us give us inspiration to start our own podcast as well. You know, it's people like yourself, fans, podcasters, you do help us, let's say, lesser podcasts sort of find our feet and, we look up to you and we really appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, I appreciate that quite a bit. And I don't intend to do that, but if I do, then that's good.
Like I
Nice.
was saying off the air to Jack and to you guys, for people who don't know who you are, things like that. I started following you this summer and just absolutely loved your positivity. And I thought the fact that you don't like everything, but you're not a jerk about it, I think that goes a long way. And you're not trying to like ruin anybody else's parade. We talked about some of the craziness that's going on in the Star Wars universe and YouTube and stuff like that. And it's nice to see because I've been on your live streams when people come in and try to give you grief and how you handle it. It's pretty awesome. I think it's pretty hilarious, and I like how you always just reference my name is a guy who loves Star Wars,
Yeah.
which kind of pound them on. They don't usually stick around for too long because you got a pretty fierce following as well. You have an awesome Discord. You have your live chat's always buzzing with a lot of positivity and a lot of comments and things like that. And they're quick to jump on anyone who comes after you on.
It always blows my mind because it's like you're clicking on a stream that says a guy who loves Star Wars and you're there to crap on Star Wars. It's like, what are you doing? Come on, what are you doing?
Yeah. If only had a brain cell. As
Exactly.
always, like we're saying, thank you so much, Mike, for joining us. Again, we've got some explorers in the chat as well. For the guys and girls that don't know who you are, though, Mike, let them know where they can find you, buddy. The floor's yours.
Well, at a guy who loves Star Wars on YouTube, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, TikTok, the whole deal. But yeah, mostly on YouTube, and we go live on YouTube every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So at a guy who loves Star Wars, not much more than that. I mean, if you like Star Wars,
Check this
I'm
guy
your
out.
guy.
Check this
Definitely
guy
is,
out. I think,
folks.
yeah, nearly 1,000 or just over 1,000 videos. Hours and hours of footage for people to catch up on. Definitely relevant. Lots to talk about. And today's topic, Jimmy, what have we got?
All right, so I don't know if you guys have heard about this little indie film called Deadpool and Wolverine that came out recently. It's kind of flying under the radar. Um, but so I went and I saw this movie the day it came out and was telling you guys I saw it 3 times over a course of 4 days. My wife was out of town, and so I went with a bunch of different buddies, and I was kind of inspired by the story. The first night I came home and I watched Logan again, and I hadn't seen Logan maybe since it came out in theaters, and I was absolutely blown away. And I think after that one, I messaged Jack and I was like, man, we've got to do
Yeah.
this Logan versus Luke, like how we handle legacy characters. And it's not a bashing on Luke session. It's just like the difference in how we handle how the characters were handled.
Yeah.
Saw it a couple times, and then of course we started chatting with Mike about coming on the show. We wanted to give him a good topic, and so this is the one that we kind of picked, and we knew you'd have lots of good things to say. But yeah, so we just kind of wanted to dive into that, and of course, then this will segue hopefully into the director of Logan, James Mangold, who was rumored with the Boba Fett film, and now he's going to get the Dawn of the Jedi. So we're going to kind of dive into that, But before we do that, we probably should find out a little bit about Mike. I know I came into your channel, Mike, and you said you had been going for 4 years. I'm a new follower. So we have a couple of things. Where did your love of Star Wars, where'd your journey start? Was it a movie, a show, your parents? I mean, how did you get into Star Wars?
So I'm quite a young lad. I may not look it, but I am. I'm only 22. So when I was born, it was right when Attack of the Clones came out. So I wasn't watching any of the prequels in the theaters. I didn't watch any of the originals in the theaters. But my sort of start with Star Wars, it was very young, probably around 4 or 5. For like Christmas or something, I got the whole Star Wars set, except for 3 because it was PG-13. So I got the whole prequel trilogy except for Revenge of the Sith, which is crazy because it's the best freaking movie. And then the original trilogy too. And it was just from there on. I mean, I was just addicted, for lack of a better word. And then the Clone Wars, of course, grew up on that. Rebels was great. It was kind of I was at a weird age where it was like almost not cool to like Star Wars when Rebels was coming out, especially because Rebels was a weird type of animation. It wasn't really like the Clone Wars either. So it just, and then of course, I mean, now, especially I will say with the pandy that happened quite a little bit ago, that kind of what made me start a channel for the first of all, but also just kind of reinvigorate almost my real sort of strong love for Star Wars and actually want to talk about it on screen for hours and hours on end. So yeah, that's kind of where it all came from.
Very cool. All right.
Nice.
Do you have, I mean, I think you told us just now, you know, it was delayed, but what would you say your favorite movie in the franchise is?
Okay, it's Revenge of the Sith. Now, I always say it's Revenge of the Sith, and I say it's not even close, but it is, of course, close. My number 2 would be Empire. My number 3 is probably like Rogue One or Return of the Jedi. I don't know. It kind of varies all the time, but it's always Revenge of the Sith. Yeah.
Pretty solid film. It's
Now
kind of funny that you didn't get. When did you first get to see Revenge of the Sith? Then,
that's a great question. Okay, so I obviously didn't get to watch it for a while because when it came out, I was 3 years old, not 13. So actually, it took me a long time. I didn't watch Revenge of the Sith for a very long time, probably till I was like 10, 11, 12, something like that. And I saw it on TV, and I actually recorded it on TV. I don't know if anybody watches something called cable anymore, but I recorded it on TV and I watched the whole thing and I was like, what have I been missing out on my entire life? I was like, this is the greatest movie ever. So maybe that's another part of the reason why I love it so much, because it's been held from me for so long. And then I finally got access to it. But from just start to finish, it's a perfect movie. You open with just the massive space battle, probably one of the best space battles in Star Wars today, even still, with Grievous, of course, taking Palpatine and then saving him. And it goes it's nonstop action, nonstop greatness till the end, where you, of course, get the greatest lightsaber duel of all time between Anakin and Obi-Wan. Well, it's also paralleled with Yoda versus Palpatine. You got Dooku getting his head chopped off. You got Grievous dying. You got it's just so good. And Anakin's fall. I mean, Hayden Christensen can't talk about it enough.
You nailed it. It did absolutely nail it. You're right. It's action non-stop. What's really interesting as well, did you watch any of the originals before you'd watched like your Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith? Or did you just go straight into 1, 2, 3?
Honestly, I don't remember because I was so young when I got the movies. However, my memory of Star Wars is the original trilogy. So the problem being of my generation, I think, is a big problem, is when you watch the original trilogy in theaters, you get the big shock of course, Vader is Luke's dad. Spoiler alert. And it's like this big shock. And then you watch the prequel trilogy and you're like, oh my God, that's Anakin. That's his dad. How is he going to fall to the dark side? Oh my God, that's Palpatine. He's going to turn into that stuff is really cool. I didn't get to really live through that. So whenever I talk to people who watch the original trilogy when they come out, I'm like, what was it like to learn that Vader was actually Luke's father, like the most evil guy in the galaxy?
Yeah, that's insane. That's why I was leading with that question, because like you mentioned there, I'm 34, so we've got like a generation with Jimmy from the originals, me with the prequels, and then yourself sort of the latter end of the prequels as well. That's awesome. Who's your favorite character then, and why? I've got a feeling it's going to be Anakin.
Favorite character is Anakin. Now, I always have, I got a top 3 that never usually changes. It's Anakin, Ahsoka, and Maul.
Nice.
Maul, again, growing up on the Clone Wars, and just the Clone Wars are so good. But the one thing the Clone Wars do the best is bring Maul back. Maul's a villain who's only in the Phantom Menace. He's this horny pause. He's this guy with horns on his head,
Yeah.
who comes in. He's this badass character, has one of the coolest lightsabers duels ever, because the Phantom Menace comes out in 1999. All the original trilogy lightsaber duels, although they're awesome, aren't nearly at the level of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon versus Maul. And then he gets chopped in half and he dies. Later,
Yeah.
whatever it is, 10 years later, he comes back in the Clone Wars and he has the greatest, one of the greatest arcs of any character, and it leads into into Rebels as well. So, but going back to my favorite character, Anakin, the whole story of Star Wars is based off of the Chosen One. It's based off of Anakin.
Yeah.
And not only is Vader he's the greatest villain of all time, but Anakin's one of the greatest characters just in general. Of course, Revenge of the Sith being my favorite movie kind of sways that a little bit, but a lot of fans, I would think, would agree with me when I say Anakin is usually the number one. I know fans have connections to certain other characters, but Anakin's that guy, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally get it. He's got a fantastic arc. And that's the thing with Maul as well. You mentioned his arc. And that's what Rebels and Clone Wars do. You know, they put a lot of meat behind that character. Because when I saw him die, that was it for me. I was like, oh, it's such a wasted character, really. You know, even that age, I just want to see more. And then obviously he makes his appearance again, and you're like, yes. And he just literally does go from strength to strength. Now this might be a bit of a daft question. How do you feel about the state of Star Wars as of today? So let's go with. I try and whittle this down a little bit, make it a bit easier. Do you think we've got too much Star Wars?
No. No. Being somebody who makes content about Star Wars, I always try to take myself out of that and say, if I was just a fan, if I wasn't trying to, let's be honest, make money off of it, like if that wasn't what was going on, if I take myself out of that, do I think I'm getting enough Star Wars? And I think, honestly, when you look at Marvel, you look at some other studios, I think Star Wars has kind of hit that sweet spot where we're not getting like a million things every year. It's maybe 2 live action shows and an animated one. Like, it's not that much. So no, I don't think so at all. No.
Yeah, I don't buy the Star Wars fatigue that some people are saying.
No.
I mean, it get a little hectic with the High Republic trying to read all those books and keep on top of things and some of the comics. But as far as for most people, TV shows and movies, there's no way they can say that we're getting too much. I just don't even see how you could pretend that's happening.
No,
But, oh my gosh, yeah. So, of course, too, with the fandom, like, let's just go ahead and dive into it real quick. You know, because you have a super positive channel. How do you feel about a franchise built on not letting your hate and anger give into? And that seems like, for me personally, like, we were just getting our Star about a year and a half old or so. And so I never really paid attention to that side of it. And I don't think Jack probably did either. We just, we're in our own circles. But it feels like it used to be a 50-50 split. But now it seems like, the hate side is, I don't know if they're just getting louder or if it's growing, especially after The Acolyte. I mean, and of course the stuff with Outlaws. I mean, it just seems like as soon as something comes out, it's doomed. So what do you think about this? Do you think we can turn this around?
Yeah. So the Star Wars fandom, and I've been talking about this for so long now, has always been divided to an extent. I think, honestly, and I wasn't around for it, but can I turn that off, please? What the hell's going on with that? With the Star Wars fandom, back at the original trilogy, the Ewoks, I think, were probably the biggest thing. Like, you were either too old to like them, or you were young enough to go, oh, teddy bears, let's go. That's cute. And I feel like that's kind of where it began. It got worse and worse and worse. Of course, the prequel trilogy being the prequel trilogy, dividing the fandom absolutely insane. With either loving it or hating it. But it just gets worse and worse. Then the sequel trilogy, we're going to talk about The Last Jedi today. We're going to talk about Luke Skywalker today. Like, that stuff really divided the fandom. And it gets worse, it gets worse, it gets worse. Every project has its own problems. The Acolyte, of course, being a massive sort of just example of that. But honestly, I still believe to my core today that the majority of the Star Wars fandom are positive people who love Star Wars. Whether they love all Star Wars or certain aspects of Star Wars, doesn't really matter. I just think the majority of people are more positive people. Going to your other point, the internet is a fairly new thing. So fans now who are negative usually have louder voices than others because more positive people just aren't talking about it. Or even if they are, they're not yelling at other people for it. So it's not drawing attention.
Yeah.
Negativity always just draws attention. It's a magnet, and people love to go to that magnet because they want to fight for what they either hate or love, and it goes both ways, but it's still a fight nonetheless, and it's not really helpful. So do I think there's a problem in the Star Wars fandom? I mean, maybe. Yes, probably. But I don't think it's that big of an issue to the point where Star Wars will just stop making content, or like Star Wars is going to be affected in any sort of massive way moving forward.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's all for the best, but the negativity can get to you sometimes. And you just mentioned that you guys are only a year and a half old. That's you're just getting started, obviously, and you guys have come quite a long way in only a year. That's impressive. But moving forward, especially like this year in particular for me, a lot of that hate has been driven to my comment sections, to just the channel in general. And for the most part, it's kind of just neglected and whatever. It's just like crazy people looking crazy, as they should. But it does come and it does hurt eventually. Like once people just keep going negative, it builds up. So it's interesting. It's a very interesting conversation to have because it could go on for the rest of time because nobody's going to change their mind. You either hate it or you love it, or you love it or you hate it, and there's no real in between, honestly.
It's
No,
definitely been.
You're definitely right.
Yeah, definitely been the biggest learning curve for us, I think, is not getting sucked into it and just being like, I mean, during our Acolyte reviews, just being kind of saddened by the state of the things that we're hearing and saying and stuff like that. But all right, well, you kind of talked about it, and we're here for, we're going to dive into this main topic, like we said. Luke, we called it Luke versus Logan, but it's really like the ending of a legacy character. Both movies come out in 2017. The Last Jedi, with a budget of roughly $300 million, it grossed $1.333 billion worldwide. Logan came out with a budget of just $97 million, and it grossed $620 million worldwide. Where do we stand? Let's just start with Logan first, okay? So, because this really was the inspiration for me for this topic. How did we feel about Logan the first time we saw it, or when we rewatched it, getting ready for Deadpool?
Absolute masterpiece in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, it's and going to what you just said about how much it made and the budget and stuff. It is a rated R movie, so that like kind of takes a little bit out of it, but it is a masterpiece. It's absolute perfect end cap to that character. And when you talk about Wolverine and Deadpool, obviously it's a different variant, but it's a perfect end cap to the character of Logan, the arc he went on. And of course, the movie itself, just if you watch only Logan, you've never seen anything else, it's just a great movie. Just a straight on movie. It doesn't really have that feeling of a superhero movie either because it's so like almost like underground kind of feel, like there's no Superman flying in. It's just Logan, and he's just got some 3 little spikes coming out of his hands. And there's no real other superheroes that involved in the movie. He's just being hunted down by regular people. So it doesn't really feel like a superhero movie. It's just a good movie, like period.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like they just kind of pull you in that slow build, that slow grind with the kids, and then of course how the story progresses, and just, I mean, we'll get into some of these questions later, but so I kind of felt the same. I hadn't seen it since I believe it came out in theaters, so going back and rewatch it right after Deadpool and Wolverine I was pretty like, wow, kind of, still riding that high from Deadpool and Wolverine. And that's an emotional, solid ending to that movie. Really makes you love Wolverine even more. And I just was like, couldn't believe. I was like, I remember liking it, but I was like, wow, this is a great, great film. Because it is, like you said, it's smaller budget. There's not a lot of things exploding, a typical, superhero film with all kinds of CGI and things like that. But it's just down to the roots of, a guy trying to protect what he loves, and pretty awesome.
There's a lot of emotions that hit home, I think, in Logan as well. And what you've got to remember with Logan is Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman's acting is superb. He really can connect with the audience. I think was it that time he was going through some personal stuff as well on top of that, and he's still pulling it out the bag. It's one of those movies I think really pulls on the heartstrings, and especially if you've got a daughter or a loved one as well, like Daphne Keane or stuff like that. It really does. It focuses a lot as well, I think, on the human side of things as well. 'Cause like Mike was saying, there's no real superhero, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's no Superman or anything like that. So, it's quite relatable, I think, in a way, to a lot of people.
Yeah.
All right. Were you satisfied with it the way it ends? Because after I watched that, I went back and I probably should have watched them in order. I've enjoyed the standalone Wolverine trilogy, because you had, the first one's not super awesome, but then they goes to Japan. That one's pretty intense, and
Yeah.
things start to happen there, and you kind of start feeling bad for him there.
Yeah.
Given the fact that we thought, all right, this is the last time we're ever going to see Wolverine, and it wasn't. We got him. We got flashbacks, and X-Men Days of whatever past and things like that. But
Yeah.
his story alone, were you fine? Like when you were done, were you fine with it? Like you're like, all right, that was it. I'm satisfied. It couldn't have happened. It couldn't have been a better ending, or were you kind of bummed? Or
Yeah, it's a strange one because it's a fitting way to end that character as well. I don't think they could have ended him any other way. I think as well, he sort of went on his terms, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the first two movies, when it comes to Wolverine, in his own trilogy, the first movie's not the greatest, as you mentioned. It's got the weird Deadpool in it with the Ryan Reynolds thing.
yeah,
But the second one in Japan is underrated. I'll give it that. But it
I
almost
love
doesn't
that.
feel like, yeah, it is good. But I feel like it just doesn't. It's under the radar completely. So it's kind of like top heavy with Logan. But when you look at like other trilogies of heroes, like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, whatever, it
Yeah.
almost like doesn't feel like the same sort of story. There's no Daphne Keene's character, X-23. She's introduced only in Logan. So obviously Charles is there, but that's about it. Like it doesn't, because the X-Men universe is so weird with Days of Future Past and recasting everybody and all that stuff. Like it almost feels like a weird connected universe that kind's almost disconnected. Like Logan feels like its own story almost,
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, that is one of the unique things about it, is the fact that after he dies, then we see everyone else is recast except for him. Because how do you recast the Wolverine?
Yeah.
Like Deadpool says, he'll be doing until he's 93 now.
Yeah.
100%.
But yeah. All right. Well, it sounds like we're all pretty positive on how it ended and everything like that. I was a little concerned. I don't know about you guys, but like the opening of Deadpool and Wolverine, I don't want to give anything away to anyone who hasn't seen it yet, but it's a pretty hilarious way to work around that whole stuff. If you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine, you got to check it out. I don't want to give too much away, but
Yeah,
of course,
if you haven't seen it, spoilers ahead.
Yeah. If you, so we're gonna go to the least decisive Star Wars movie ever made. Now, everyone loved it, universally loved, 100%. I think it got 101% on Rotten Tomatoes because everyone was so excited for it. Was The Last Jedi with, and for as much hate as it gets, it still made over $1 billion. So, how did we feel? And I when we reference this a lot, because I talked about it with Vernestra during the Acolyte, was like, that doesn't seem like the Vernestra from the books, but I'm not going to sit there and cry about that's not my Vernestra. How did we feel about the end of Luke Skywalker? Did that do enough? Did Rian Johnson bring it home for you? Do you see what he was trying to do? Like, how do we feel about that movie?
Am I going first? Okay.
Go, Mike.
Let's see. Let's see. Where do I start with The Last Jedi? So, like we just talked about, the first Star Wars movies I saw in the theaters were the sequel trilogy. So, for me, watching Star Wars on the big screen was awesome. And the sequel trilogy, nobody can deny, visually is incredible. Just the CGI is so leaps and bounds ahead. The Last Jedi in particular has some very, very cool scenes. The stuff on Crate, the showdown on Crate is really cool visually. Of course, the Haldo maneuver was very, very cool visually. The throne room scene was cool. Like, there's some cool stuff in that movie.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite. It's actually probably my least favorite Star Wars movie. But with that being said, Luke Skywalker's journey is something that I see in my own head as incomplete. I get that that's the end of his journey, and we saw the beginning of his journey in A New Hope, but there's a middle there that's just not there. Like, why is he on Octu and like that? Obviously, in The Last Jedi, it's explained that he saw that Ben's having a bad dream. That can't be just it. There has to be more to that to me. So I feel like it's an unfinished story. However, his death in The Last Jedi is not a bad one. Force projecting across the galaxy in one of the coolest sort of force ability, whatever you want to call it, is pretty badass. It's pretty cool. And some fans really love that movie, like really love that movie. And obviously we're never going to crap on those people for liking it. But to me, it just doesn't, it feels like a missing piece to the puzzle with Luke Skywalker. Maybe that will be filled in eventually. Maybe not. I don't know. But the Luke Skywalker I see in Return of the Jedi is not the same one in The Last Jedi. There's just a big missing chunk of the story. So for me, it's like I'm waiting for this story to be finished. We got the middle. I mean, we got the end and we got the beginning, but we don't have the middle yet. So for me, The Last Jedi is it's not my favorite, just because of Luke Skywalker in particular. Because I like Kylo Ren. I do. How can you not?
Yeah,
but that's my take for now.
Yeah.
What about you, Jack?
Yeah. I'm down with Mike. It's the least favorite of mine. When I first watched it, I think I sat there for a bit longer thinking, "What's going on here?" I didn't quite process it. I had to go and watch it again because a lot of things didn't make sense to me. But with Rian Johnson's films as well, he does put little golden nuggets in there. So if you do blink, you will miss it. I haven't watched it quite a few more times. I sort of come round to it, but I'm totally on board with like what Mike's saying. You know, we've got Luke Skywalker from the OTs, where he's a get up and go, can do attitude, very vibrant, like a young kid really ready to go to the toy store is the best way I think off the top of my head I can describe it. Then we get to The Last Jedi and he's now a grumpy old man that doesn't want to leave the house. It just doesn't make sense, you know. He was the inspiration for an entire rebellion. So something has got to have gone seriously wrong for him to go, you know what, actually this is not for me. I get it did put some backstory on it with the whole Jedi temples burning down, and I can kind of see it traumatizing him. I don't know, you know, unless he watched Baby Grogu get chopped in half by Kylo Ren, I can't think of what would drove him to go so crazy, if I'm honest. But yeah.
Going to what you just said, I think a lot of fans that grew up on the original trilogy or even the prequel trilogy or both, in their heads have had this idea of where Luke, Leia, and Han went. After 1983, they've had this idea for their entire lives, whether it's from Legends, the Heir to the Empire trilogy, or whatever. They've had this idea of what would happen with Luke, Leia, and Han, and this wasn't it. This wasn't it at all. So when Han Solo dies in the first movie, Luke dies in the second movie, Leia dies in the third, they're like, what's going on? This is not what I thought was happening. But that's not because these characters are just being thrown away. That's because the middle part of the story hasn't been told yet. We didn't get to see Luke Skywalker's Jedi Temple and how it fell or any of that stuff. So we don't know if Grogu got cut in half. We don't know if Mara Jade actually played a role somehow. They maybe even fell in love and she dies to Kylo Ren, or she dies to Snoke, or she dies. Like, we don't know any of that. Something crazy could happen. A Luke Skywalker clone could still technically happen, and maybe it's his blood that gets taken, and he knows he has to go cut himself off from the Force so that the Empire can't get his blood to make a Force a clone army of him. Like, maybe there's something like that. There has to be a better explanation to me, and I think there's just a big piece of that puzzle that's missing, and a lot of fans wanted to see that middle part, not the end part, that middle part, and they got the end instead, and that's what really angered them.
And they're probably working on that extensively now as well. I do agree that the whole Force thing across the galaxy, amazing. Happy with that. Happy how he died to an extent. What I was going to say then, but yeah, it's just having him leave how he left with there's no middle ground. And not my biggest regret, but the one thing I wish they'd done is reunited all of them before taking them all away. That's the biggest thing I think they missed personally. Like Han, Chewie, Leia, Luke, R2. See if it one last thing in the Falcon.
Yeah.
You know, I think it'd ease the pain, let's say, for a lot of people losing their favorite characters. And like I said on previous shows, you know, Star Wars will go on without Skywalkers. It's not all about Skywalkers. This saga, like Mike said, was all about Anakin Skywalker's saga. You know, so it will go on without Skywalker for sure.
Well, that's like with the Ghostbusters movie, when the newer one came out, the first like reboot or however you want to call it, bringing Egon back and doing all like people that satisfied, for an okay movie, that nostalgia brought everybody back. I'm kind of in the same boat with you guys. The Last Jedi and Attack of the Clones kind of rival my bottom two. I always kind of go by how did I feel the first time I watched it, and The Last Jedi, I came out of there and I was like, what? Not to say that I don't like the movie all by itself. I think it's great. I would love to see Rian Johnson get a trilogy away from away from Skywalkers. I think, like you guys said, like cinematography, the story, the guy can tell great stories. I don't know how I felt like he handled, things. And I guess, and that's one thing too, is, Star Wars fans are our own worst enemies, where we're like, that's not how I saw it going down. And I think, Jack, like you said, it would have been nice to see all of our heroes back together again for one more, it would have been cool to have like these kids saving the day, but they need the old crew to come in and do stuff like that. But that movie, I'm not sure. Like, cause you said, like, it's an awesome force power. Like to be able to do that, to push yourself all the way across the galaxy, fight Kylo Ren. He doesn't even realize it. The first time you watch the movie, do you even notice there's no footprints in the salt?
Yeah, you have no idea.
I know the second time, because I watched it at like 7:00 at night, and then I went right back in at midnight to watch it a second time with a buddy. And I was like, that's the only thing I wanted to see was like, were there footprints in that salt? And there weren't. And I was like, oh, okay, I missed it. But I think, and of course, it suffers from 3 different directors, no vision. Like, let's just make some Star Wars movies and get our money back that we gave, we give George $4 billion. We need to start recouping on that. But
there's things leading up to it as well that don't out. Like, obviously, really the last major thing to happen in that film is Luke's death. But you got the whole Leia floating through space thing. Again, I wasn't a massive fan of that either, and I'm still not, if I'm honest. I can cope with fire in space, whatever, but having someone float through space, I was a bit like, oh, okay. And then it's other things as well around it. Like, you're not really seeing Finn develop much. Poe sort of slowed down a little bit. Phasma going as well, the way she went. It's a bit like, oh.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. I always talk about too when it comes to The Last Jedi, is if, like you just said, Jimmy, there's 3 different directors, or I guess it's 2 different directors, but there's 3 different movies. But if it was JJ's vision throughout the whole 3, honestly, it would probably be better. Even if it was Ryan's vision throughout the whole 3, it'd probably be better. Because in The Force Awakens, I feel like The Force Awakens is a really solid movie. It's obviously it kills Han, which a lot of people hate, but it sets up the new characters and even the old ones with great stories to come. You're like, who the hell's this Snoke guy? Rey is a very interesting character. Finn, a fallen stormtrooper, that's awesome. Poe Dameron, of course, you got to have the pilot. Leia, what happened with Leia and Han? How did their kid become evil? Why is Luke off on an island by himself? Like, by the end of The Force Awakens, you're asking so many questions. You're asking the right questions, and you want to see more of these brand new characters like Rey, Finn, Kylo, BB-8, all of them. And I think what happens with The Last Jedi is it takes all those. You hope Finn's going to become a Jedi. You hope that Rey is going to be somebody of importance. In The Last Jedi, literally takes that, or Snoke even takes that, kills Snoke, makes Rey a nobody, doesn't turn Finn into a Jedi at all. It kind of sidelines Finn, and just takes all that. In the opening scene, Luke grabs the lightsaber from Rey. Everybody's waiting years now to see what's going to happen, and he throws it over his shoulder. It's kind of just like everybody was really hyped up from The Force Awakens, even if some people didn't kind of like that Han died, whatever. But then they just crap on all that they did so well in the first movie and just don't do it in the second movie,
It's like he took the script and just ripped it all up and just went crazy.
Yes, exactly. It's almost like he didn't watch The Force Awakens when he was making The Last Jedi.
He was just getting rid of people left, right, and Charlie.
Yeah.
What about you, Jimmy?
Well, I mean, just like I said, like, it just doesn't make sense to me to go and make a trilogy with no plan. I mean, you can see it plain as day. Like, I'm not sure, Mike, how much you read the High Republic stuff, but that was a well thought out. I mean, there's things that are weaved in and out. I mean, those writers sat down, they planned this out with Project Luminous, and it pays off. I mean, there's times, and you're just like, oh man, that's crushed it. Why not take an extra year? At least game plan the next 2 movies. This is what we need to hit. This is what we're going to set it. Because we, like you said, Mike, you set up all these amazing questions, exactly what the first movie should do.
Yep.
You know, JJ's famous for not answering any of his questions.
Yeah.
You can leave it up to Ryan, and then if it was it Colin Trevorrow or whatever who was supposed to do it, but just without having the plan, and that kind of leads me to the next question: was it easier for Marvel because they have the Old Man Logan comic? Was it a graphic novel, I think, or comic? Is it easier for them? Is it Marvel having a better time because they have, because people getting that argument where, Marvel has all this stuff, but we have Legends, but it doesn't really fit with the Star Wars that we're seeing. Do you guys think it was easier for Marvel and for James Mangold to, end the
I
character?
don't think it was. I don't think it was, because the Marvel stuff comic-wise isn't really Legend. They've sort of got to stick by it, so they've got stuff to work off. Whereas this stuff with The Last Jedi, it's a blank slate. They can do whatever they want to do, which obviously they did. But like Mike said, the biggest thing is, the issue is, like, you look at The Mandalorian is a perfect example, and also Ahsoka is, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have the overall say. They all sit in a room with the directors. The directors pitch their ideas, and they'll say yes or no, or they'll say not quite that, but this, etc., etc. That didn't happen in The Last Jedi. I don't believe for 1 second that happened. If they do a Project Luminous again, but for movies for Star Wars, they'll bring it back. No shadow of a doubt. They've done it with High Republic books. Marvel Comics, they've got loads of stuff to go off. They've got to get it right. There's no blank slate for those. They've got diehard fans, longer diehard fans as well, because it's been around a lot longer. And then a character like Logan as well is probably, I'd say, almost the equivalent to Luke Skywalker. Do you think, Mike, with Marvel?
Yeah, I mean, because when you think Marvel, you think of Spider-Man or Wolverine, pretty much.
Yeah, 100%. So for me, I think Marvel had the harder film to do, or the harder character or legacy to close down.
Yeah, I agree with that, because Luke Skywalker is a main character in the original trilogy. Obviously, he's not a main character in the sequel trilogy. So he is one of a main character, and you're ending his story. But with Logan, it's the Logan movie. It's Logan's movie. This is it. This is it.
Yeah.
So you have a lot more responsibility with that specific character to do it well than Luke, because it's not the Luke movie. It's it is kind of The Last Jedi, but it's not Luke's movie. So him dying in that movie is not the end all be all. Logan dying is the end of the Logan movies, because he is Logan. Yeah.
That's a really good point as well, really, because you got to think of it as well. And Mark Hamill was saying this, this is their time to pass the torch on. This film isn't like Logan. It's not called, Star Wars Luke Skywalker.
Exactly.
Yes, it speaks about The Last Jedi, but it's just come up because, like Mike was saying, but the Last Jedi, again, classic Rian Johnson, it's not actually Luke Skywalker at all. It's talking about Rey. Personally, that's what you could think of it. Again, because he's so clever, I direct stuff. It can be any opinion, and I think that's what I'm gonna say annoyed people or upset people is people were expecting it to be a lot more about Luke. But I think that also ties into what we're saying, Mike, as well, where it hasn't got that middle ground. You can kill Snoke, you can float Leia through as much space as you want, you can say that Rey's a nobody, but you haven't given people enough middle ground to get, let's say, back on board with Luke. It's like they've lost the connection to the Force, and everyone stood there like, what's going on?
Yep, exactly.
All right. Well, okay. So, and that's a really good point. I guess maybe I hadn't thought of it, the fact that it's not Luke's movie. So, like maybe that death wasn't supposed to be as great or whatever. I guess it's just the end of a character that we've loved. I mean, for me, I'm almost 50 years old. So, I've been around Luke for a long time, and I just, I'm fine with how writers do things and how they end stuff. And I don't claim to be able to do any better. I wouldn't be able to write a better ending, I don't think, but it just didn't hit for me. But I like that this was not Luke's story versus it is Logan's story. I mean, it's really good. So then, we get Logan back in Deadpool, and we've got him back in some other things, but like Deadpool and Wolverine kind of is like a direct shot at that Logan, really. Because of the much beloved multiverse, you like it or you love it, or you get a new Doom or whatever, however you want to look at it. Does Star Wars need to use the world between worlds the way that Marvel uses a multiverse? Now, I know this, as soon as Dave Filoni introduced the world between worlds, I knew all hell was going to break loose, because now he's opened the door, cracked the door to a multiverse almost. Michael, I'll let you start there because you had a visual reaction. So what do you think? And then we could get more story, or should they go back and should they do your middle part and give us a Luke story while we still have Mark Hamill?
Yes, that. Well, yeah. So let me start with this. No, the world between worlds is not a time travel device. I think the world between worlds is one of the coolest things to ever be introduced into Star Wars, especially as of late. It's Dave Filoni's child. It is genius. It brought back Ahsoka, of course, which can't get enough Ahsoka. But it's not a time travel device. Now, the way the world between worlds works is very strange in how Palpatine describes it as a conduit between the living and the dead. Ahsoka never died on Malachor 5. She always gets saved by Ezra. We never see her die. She never actually dies. She gets saved by Ezra in the world between worlds. In Ahsoka, she gets pulled in. You could argue, but I think she gets saved by Anakin. She gets pulled in as she falls off the cliff. So she gets saved twice by the world between worlds, but neither time is she actually dying. The world between worlds is not a changer of the multiverse, so to speak. It's just something that exists in between the living and the dead. So I think, honestly, as we get more explanation about the world between worlds, maybe we'll learn more about it. I think it has something to do with the ability to see Force ghosts. We talked about this on my live stream yesterday about Obi-Wan Kenobi Season 2, the possibility of that. What the hell would a Kenobi Season 2 look like?
Well, I have a theory.
Yeah, well, if there was a possibility of a Season 2, seeing him train to become a Force ghost, maybe you could involve the world between worlds in sort of the training, in learning that the world between worlds is the way to do that, kind of come back in visually as a Force ghost to do that. Going to the multiverse side of it, the multiverse is something, especially now, for some reason, that everybody's doing. DC's done it, Marvel's done it, even movies like was it last year? Everything Everywhere All at Once, one of the best movies. Multiverse is everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, those movies are fantastic. I'm not saying the multiverse is a bad thing. It's kind of being overplayed right now, but it's not a bad thing at all times. For example, Deadpool and Wolverine is a extraordinarily good movie, and it uses the multiverse. So it's not always a bad thing, but I don't think it has any place in Star Wars. Absolutely no place in Star Wars. Yeah. Star Wars is something so sacred to so many people who love it that if you reboot the sequels, reboot the originals, or anything like that, you're going to anger so many more fans than you ever thought would be possible. And you're better off just telling new stories or trying to fix a story. When we talk about the Clone Wars and how it's made so many more people love the prequel trilogy or love Anakin or love Obi-Wan or whatever it may be, see more of that fall to the dark side, that's because there's 7 seasons, 150 episodes of more of that storytelling. So if you want to fix the sequel trilogy, if you want to fix Luke Skywalker, you tell more story before it, how he fell, how he ended up on Arc 2, why that all happened. I don't think you have to go into any multiverse or anything like that.
Yeah, 100%. I'm sort of with and against Mike with some things there. So for me, the world between worlds is like treading on glass. You've got to be extra careful in what you do. And Dave Filoni is the only man, personally, I think should be allowed the keys to that padlock. Nobody else, because again, one wrong step, we're in a world of pain. The thing, I cannot stand it. And
really,
obviously, everyone loved the Deadpool Logan stuff. I love Spider-Man as well and that stuff. But for me, one of the reasons I stopped watching the Marvel stuff is because I literally lost track of who and what timeline was going on and where. And I've tried. I watched Deadpool and Logan. It was okay. I did like it. It was actually too much multiverse for me. And I was literally just sat there thinking, like, there is so much going on. And my wife thinks the exact same. I just want to sit back and just, how can I put this? Just sit back and just stare at a canvas and just imagine stuff. But with the multiverse, there's so much like left and right, and it's just crazy for me. I like all the what ifs. They're brilliant. I think they're fantastic. there's so much you can do with that, and I'd love to see Star Wars What Ifs when we sort of got that. I think with the Lego stuff, which we'll talk about later. But for me, the World Between Worlds, it's a glass pathway that only Dave Filoni should have the keys to. Because again, one wrong move, it's game over completely. I think people are extremely sensitive at the minute, and I sort of think that Mandalorian season 2, getting Luke Skywalker back was a little bit, how can I say it, not justification, but it gave people a bit more, okay, so Luke is still the Luke that we know. But like we were saying earlier, I think, Mike, it's we need that middle ground now. I don't think you can do that with the World Between Worlds or the multiverse.
I understand. Yeah, so I absolutely get that. For me, with the multiverse, especially with Marvel, is I'm a crazy person, so I love to try and follow all those different lines, but I fully understand taking myself out of it.
Yeah.
I fully understand not liking the multiverse. And I actually, in some instances, like over at DC, I hate the multiverse over there. But it's because you can either do it well or you can do it poorly. And actually, either way, you're going to find people like Jack, like a lot of people, I'm sure, that just don't want to follow all that. It's too much. It's just way too much.
Yeah,
and I agree with literally the World Between Worlds being a glass pathway because it looks like a glass pathway. And only Dave Filoni should touch it. Absolutely only Dave Filoni should touch it. If you really think about it, we've only seen it twice.
Yeah.
In Ahsoka and in Rebels.
And
Ahsoka, that's it.
Yeah.
Both sort of, both of them have only been about Ahsoka really. And honestly, I'd be okay if we only ever saw it one more time. Maybe never. Like, it's something that it's like Yoda's species. We don't need to know answers to that. It's something that can continue to be a mystery. Like, that Palpatine was trying to get involved with it in the back in the prequel days or in between the prequels and the original trilogy. And Ahsoka has some sort of connection to it, probably because she's pretty much the living embodiment of the light side with the daughter. But that probably has something to play with it. But that leaves it up to speculation. That leaves it up to fan conversations about what is the World Between Worlds truly. What's the exactly. That's the conversations you want to have. Not can this change the events of the sequel trilogy? Can this reboot the original trilogy? Is this a different universe from that or this, that, and that? And trying to follow all that. The World Between Worlds is a very well created sort of piece to the puzzle in Star Wars, but it's definitely not a multiverse creator. That's for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with both you two. I was curious as what you guys thought. I thought we were fine when it was only in Rebels, but when it showed up in Ahsoka, I would go, uh-oh, because now it's live action. There's a lot of Star Wars fans that haven't watched the animated series, and you're missing out, folks. If you haven't watched the animated series, they enhanced, like Mike said. I mean, I feel like the Clone Wars just makes the prequels more watchable, especially and builds up the Revenge of the Sith and everything like that. But so I totally agree with you, because I think that would be the end of Star Wars if they started doing things like that. It works for the multiverse because they've had it in the comics. The diehards get it and they know how it works. And it seems like and these aren't the same franchise. Like they're both supernatural in ways, but they are different and they've established these rules. So I wonder what the conversation was like when Filoni's like, "This is what I want to do," and everyone around the table like, freaking out. But
actually, Jimmy, could you do me one favor? Could you pull up Amanda's comment right now? I have the chat on the side.
Absolutely.
So this says is Disney also said fans wouldn't need to watch the shows to understand the movies for Marvel, but that turns out not to be true. It's a lot of work keeping up with it. And this goes back to what Jack was just saying. With Marvel, it's so hard to follow because if you haven't seen Loki season 1 and 2, it's nearly impossible to understand what's going on in Deadpool and Wolverine. It's impossible to figure out what's going on almost anywhere else. So you do have to watch all of it. With Star Wars, they've done a very good job, especially Dave Filoni, in giving projects like Ahsoka, where yes, you can watch Clone Wars and Rebels and already love these characters, and then watch Ahsoka and it feels like the greatest thing ever. But you can watch Ahsoka having no prior knowledge of Star Wars at all. You don't even have to watch the original trilogy, and you can watch the show, enjoy it. Maybe you won't get all the sort of small little details and stuff, but it's still a story about Ahsoka because she's the titular character, and it's her journey trying to go find this Thrawn character, heir to the Empire, and Sabine trying to go find her friend Ezra. And if you haven't seen these people, don't know these people, you can still understand that. You can still understand the journey and understand the story. With Marvel, that's completely out the window. If you haven't watched this, you don't know that. If you haven't done that, you don't know this. So yeah, it's a great thing that Star Wars does very well.
Star Wars catered, I think, very well for the casual and the hardcore, whereas Marvel was more hardcore, I reckon. But as well, what I will say was very clever with Dave Filoni was, and again, Mark was saying it was like the introduction of stuff like the Purgles. You know, Star Wars has secrets that people don't need to know about, as in the species of Yoda, etc. Purgles was one of them, and it was very clever how they slowly introduced it through Mandalorian, the live action, from obviously the animated stuff. So again, if you haven't seen the animated stuff and someone said to you there's whales in space, you'd laugh your head off. And then if you watch The Mandalorian, you sort of think, oh, I know what he's on about. I've seen that in The Mandalorian. And then when you see it in Ahsoka, it's like, right, okay. And then again, going back to previous comments, it's like the Purgles really is a super powerful thing. And I'm glad now it's being gone and hopefully sort of put to one side. We don't want that to be a constant thing of, well, we can't get back to, I don't know, Naboo, for example. Let's just jump on a Purgle's tongue and away we go.
Yes.
You know, those things are gone.
Sure.
Yes, again, they explain that very well. Like Ahsoka has to communicate with the Purgles, and she doesn't even know where they're going to take them. Like they do that
Exactly,
so well.
yeah.
And going back to what Jimmy said, when Dave Filoni comes in and goes, "We're going to do the world between worlds," everybody's like, "What are you talking about?" He comes in and goes, "We're going to do space whales, but they're going to have the octopus tentacles too, and they're going to go through hyperspace." They're like, "Dave, what are we talking about today, buddy?"
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of wrapping this portion of it up because I know we're closing on an hour, Mike. We want to be appreciative of your time. Can we compare these two movies? Can we compare these endings then? I mean, because what do you guys think? Like, can we compare Luke and Logan then? Because you guys brought up a lot of great points about, and the one that really thrown me is like Logan's movie. The Last Jedi is not Luke's movie. So for me, that kind of like put this whole conversation not at a standstill because they still end these legacy characters, but it also gives me a different way of looking at things as well. So
for me, you could definitely compare these two characters a lot, actually, because Logan is he's a centerpiece in that franchise of the X-Men and all that stuff. Luke Skywalker is a centerpiece in Star Wars. Killing off both these characters in the way that they did, obviously very different. Logan gets his own movie specifically about his death, about all that. Luke Skywalker is just in another trilogy. It's in another part of his part of his story. It's part of somebody else's story. But you can definitely compare the two characters because they are very important pieces of both franchises. Now, when it comes to Logan, it's a little bit more like he got more story told. Hugh Jackman played Wolverine for 20 years before he died, and now he's back, obviously playing Wolverine again. But he played him for 20 years, and that's a long time. Mark Hamill plays Luke Skywalker for 9 years in the original trilogy, and then he doesn't play him for 30 some odd years, and then he comes back and plays him for 4 years, something like that. So I feel like Hugh Jackman and the audiences got to spend so much more time with Logan for an extended period of time. And it wasn't like there was this massive gap in the middle and then he dies. We got to see the full story of Logan. And Luke, I still will nail to the end of my days that we haven't seen his entire story. And there's a big piece of that missing. And with Logan, I think his death means so much more because we've spent so much more time with this character. And we feel like we know his character so much more. It feels like we don't know what happened with Luke. We don't know what happened to him. We haven't been through that with him. And with Logan, we did. So that's kind of the big difference there. But I do think they're very similar characters in the way that they are very important in both of their own respective franchises.
Yeah, totally agree. Short and sweet for me on this one. They're both the same character. Logan's got more backstory. Luke hasn't, and that's not because of time on screen either. That's personally, I think Star Wars or Disney or whoever saying that legend doesn't exist. I think if they'd kept the legend stuff, we'd have sort of been on par, if not round about the same. But yeah, because that's obviously out the window, gone. They lost a lot of backstory and a lot of people, connected with Luke during that period of Return of the Jedi to the Last Jedi.
what did they call Logan's character in Deadpool and Wolverine? The cornerstone or the
anchor being.
anchor being?
The
Yeah, I feel
yeah,
like these are both. I mean, Luke would be the anchor being in Star
Yeah.
Wars, and you
Yeah.
know, I think you're right though, Mike. I do think that we need the rest of that story. I don't care how he would get it. I mean,
Yeah.
animated TV show. I mean, they need to do something while we still have Mark Hamill with, we've got 2 or 3 people left from the original, franchise. So, um,
Absolutely.
yes, but I got one final question. We'll kind of cut this last part short a little bit, but of course, we're talking about these 2 movies. It sounds like, we're hyped on both of them. As where we fall. We all seem pretty similar. We love Logan. The Last Jedi kind of left us maybe wanting more, maybe more answers, more questions to be answered, um, filling in that story, like you said, Mike. But are we excited knowing that James Mangold, the director of Logan, who was supposed to do a Boba Fett, and recently on Happy, Sad, Confused, he said he was making a borderline rated R spaghetti western that he was sure was not going to get picked up prior to Solo happening, and then all hell breaking loose, which I think was more about The Last Jedi than was Solo, because I'll die on that hill that Solo is, as my favorite movie. But are we excited to get to see him tackle this next Star Wars movie, The Dawn of the Jedi? This is going to be away from everything. It's going to, he said in this interview, it'll predate terms such as Jedi, Sith, midichlorians. You'll see things that will become Jedi, Sith, and midichlorians. But are we excited to see him? Also, he has Beau Willimon, who is written 6 episodes of Andor season 1. He's credited with 3 episodes for season 2, 73 episodes of House of Cards, and he's written a couple of movies. So sounds like he's got a
yeah,
pretty. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was one of the co-writers on One Way Out for the Andor series, and then
Yeah.
finished off the series. The last 3 episodes were all him, I believe. So, are we excited for this duo to be tackling this new Star Wars film?
Yeah. I mean, I still think James Mangold might be probably the most underrated, or not so underrated, but he's probably one of the greatest directors around right now. Obviously, there's some very good directors right now. You got your Christopher Nolans, you got your what the guy who does Avatar,
James Cameron.
James Cameron. But James Mangold, he's done some incredible movies. Obviously, Logan being one of them.
yeah,
But I think have you guys seen Ford versus
Oh yeah,
Ferrari?
it's
That
really
movie's
good.
incredible. But he's just an incredible director. And you add, what was his name?
Beau Willimon.
Beau Willimon. Yeah, you add that guy who has Star Wars experience. That's the biggest thing for me is when you're gonna do a movie, you want people on that movie, since now that you have Disney Plus, you have the ability to do this. You want people who have already worked on Star Wars before. And now that you have Star Wars shows, you can have people like Bryce Dallas Howard, Deborah
Mm.
Chow, Taika Waititi, like people who have directed episodes of The Mandalorian, come on and direct
yeah,
movies or write on movies. You have that ability now. So to bring in this guy who's already done Andor, not to mention some fan favorite Andor arcs, you're gonna bring in a lot of fans who already enjoy the guy, and you already know that he's good at writing Star Wars. And it's Dawn of the Jedi. I mean, come on. People have been waiting for this forever. Yes, it's in Legends, but we want it in canon. And it's the Dawn of the Jedi. We talk about the Skywalker saga and how we want new stories. This is 25,000 years before, and it could start something
yeah,
that could lead to the Old Republic. It could lead to Revan. It could lead to what people want to see, but it's the beginning of the Jedi. It's the first ever Jedi. And the ability to do that and to do that well with James Mangold being the great director that he is and a writer that's already done incredible Star Wars, it's a recipe for success, which is not something that you say every day when it comes to Star Wars.
yeah, yeah. I'm excited about James Mangold. I'd love to see Tony Gilroy tackle a film, or
Yes.
Bryce Dallas Howard, like unreal.
Yes.
But what I will say, I think it's easier to go forward than it is to go back. The Acolyte's a prime case of that, because you're gonna get a lot more questions than you are answers with things that might not make sense because they've already happened or so forth. But yeah, no, I am excited. I'm always excited for Star Wars anyway.
Yeah.
But I just think just be careful. Just really, really be careful. You've got to have a lot of guidance with this. Yeah, I'm a bit nervous. I don't want to say scared, but just nervous because I don't want it to bomb as bad as people said the Acolyte did. That's my only take really for it. How they're going to do this, I have no idea, because I've already got visions of Tatooine being like a lush green sea-like planet, and then hopefully we see white went to sand sort of thing. I think little things like that would be great. But again, you've just got to be really careful. It's so hard to go back than it is to go forward. I mean, George Lucas, he did a whole, pretty much wrote The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith in his head when he'd done New Hope. So that he was answering his own questions anyway. But with this, you've just got to have that guidance, I think, like Mark was saying.
That's true. And the best part about that for me is that Dave Filoni's now like the chief creative officer over there. So now he's like looking over everything. I would have been a lot more concerned if that wasn't the case. But now, like Dave Filoni, I trust him with my life at this point. Like I have no doubt in my mind that whatever happens in that Dawn of the Jedi movie, when it comes to the first ever Jedi, first ever Sith, how it connects, like you said, Tatooine was once a luscious green planet. I believe Mustafar was once a luscious green planet. Like seeing stuff like that, Dave Filoni's the guy for that. So he's the guy to kind of get that stuff done.
Absolutely.
I
think
I agree with Fearless there. Yeah. See the Zeppo, that'll be awesome.
That'd be pretty cool. I think that there's enough out there with, some of the stuff from, the Jedi games and things like that. But you also get Dave's love of wolves, and you get those stories of like when you're going to feed and all this. And I think it has the potential to just maybe reset things. Even though we know what's coming down the line, it's 25,000 years. You can set a whole new franchise in between that and the Phantom Menace. I think Mangold does a great job. I know people weren't super hyped on Indiana Jones 5, but growing up with Indiana Jones and being the age I'm at, it was a great movie because, I'm getting to the point in my life where it's like, like young kids don't understand what it's like to be however old he was supposed to be in that film, and having watched him get older and things like that. I think it was an underrated film as well. But I'm excited that Mangold's at the helm. He seems like he has a love for the, I watched that interview. He has a love for Star Wars, an understanding for it. And then, of course, this writer, Bo, it's going to be fantastic, I think, with just the writing chops of Andor. So maybe a little bit more intense of a, of a movie. More, so it's exciting. The potential's, I mean, everything's always got potential until it's done. And then we'll see what happens and we'll kind of go from there. But Mike, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. I want to say again, I cannot express enough how much I appreciate your positivity in this world. Given, like I said, even before all this nonsense of the last couple of weeks, when I found your channel on YouTube, I was immediately just a fan because of your positivity and the way you sell things. And I do appreciate that in this world. So again, thank you very much for coming on. One more time, tell everybody where they can find you if they don't already know.
Well, I appreciate that quite a bit. This was quite a fun one. Of course, want to come back, but a guy loves Star Wars on everything, everything, pretty much. If Facebook still exists, maybe I'm on there, maybe not. But a guy loves Star Wars on everything. Of course, live streams every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday on the main channel. So watch out for that. And working on some big things over there. So I can't thank you guys enough for having me. Of course, very nice of you for saying all those nice things. It doesn't feel real, any of this. But it's a fun ride. It's a fun ride for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a fun ride. Again, thank you so much, Mike, for joining us. Keep churning out the great content. We'll definitely have you back. We'd love to jump on your show as well at some point. Thank you to everybody that has joined us as well in the chat. Again, if you want to be part of the community, Explore the Force, all one word, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, and YouTube. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. For myself, again, Mike, thank you so much. Super appreciate the hell out of you. Thank you so much for your time, buddy. One last time then before we cut off, we always finish off with a little saying. So for myself, may the Force be with you. Mike.
May the Force be with you.
And for all of us, we have spoken. We'll see you guys next week. Awesome.